the world watched with cautious optimism. On August 15, 2025, a significant diplomatic effort took place in the stark neutral landscape of Alaska. Former U.S. President Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin met for a high-stakes summit, Handshake Summit Building Exterior. The meeting lasted for 3 hours. The primary goal was to find a path toward peace in the long and brutal war in Ukraine. Hopes were high that this direct conversation could break the ongoing stalemate. The discussions were held behind closed doors, leaving journalists and international observers to speculate on the potential for a breakthrough that has eluded so many others before them. Following the lengthy meeting, details of the discussions began to emerge. Though the summit did not result in an immediate ceasefire agreement, it did produce a concrete proposal from Moscow. President Trump reportedly conveyed this offer to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky shortly after his talk with Putin. Russia's proposition was clear. Moscow offered to freeze most of the existing front lines in place. This would mean a halt to the fighting along the vast and bloody contact line. However, this halt came with a significant and difficult condition for Ukraine to consider in its ongoing struggle for sovereignty. The Russian proposal required Ukraine to make a painful concession. In exchange for freezing the front lines, Moscow demanded a complete withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the eastern portions of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. This territory has been a central focus of the conflict since its earliest days. President Zelensky's response was swift and unambiguous. He outright rejected the proposal. The Ukrainian government stated that accepting these terms was not possible. Such a withdrawal, they argued, would amount to surrendering key defensive positions and strategically important land to the aggressor without any guarantees for future security. While diplomats talked, soldiers fought and died on the Eastern Front. The situation on the ground continued to evolve, largely in Russia's favor. Recent reports indicate a steady, if slow, advance by Russian forces. From July 15th to August 12th, 2025, Russia captured an additional 241 square miles. This represents a 7% increase compared to the previous month. This methodical advance shows that Russia's military machine, despite heavy losses and sanctions, remains capable of applying consistent pressure and seizing land piece by piece. These gains aren't just lines on a map. They are villages, towns, farmlands falling under Russian control. The strategic implications are becoming alarmingly clear. The push in the Dobropilya-Pokrovsk sectors is particularly concerning for the Ukrainian military command. These advances are not random. They are part of a calculated effort to threaten and sever key Ukrainian supply lines. The city of Kramatorsk, a major administrative and military hub for Ukrainian forces in the Donbas, is now facing an increasingly precarious situation. The roads. The railways that supply the city with troops, ammunition, humanitarian aid are coming under direct threat from Russian artillery and from forward units. If these supply lines are cut, the consequences for Ukrainian defenders in the region would be dire. Kramatorsk serves as a linchpin for Ukraine's entire defensive posture in the eastern part of the country. The skies over Ukraine have become a new and terrifying battlefield. The skies over Ukraine have become a new and terrifying battlefield. In the past month, the use of drones has escalated dramatically, particularly by Russian forces. According to a recent United Nations monitoring mission report, an astonishing 2,600 drone attacks were recorded. 2,600 drone attacks. This figure marks the highest monthly rate of drone usage since the war began. These unmanned aerial vehicles, primarily the Iranian-designed Shahed models, are being used to terrorize civilian populations and strike critical infrastructure far from the front lines. The constant threat of these attacks has become a grim reality for millions of Ukrainians. Russia is not just using more drones. It is actively working to enhance its drone production and deployment capabilities. Intelligence reports suggest that Moscow is ramping up its domestic manufacturing of Shahed drones. The goal is to build a capacity to launch overwhelming swarm attacks. The terrifying objective is to be able to fire as many as 2,000 drones simultaneously. Analysts believe that if Russia's current production growth continues at its present rate, it could achieve this by as early as November 2025. This would represent a significant and dangerous escalation in the air war. Ukraine is not simply enduring these attacks, it is fighting back with its own increasingly sophisticated drone campaign. Ukrainian drone operators. Unable to match Russia's military might in a conventional sense, Ukraine has adopted an asymmetric strategy. One recent and notable success: strike on the Syzran oil refinery in Samara. Explosion and damage at Syzran refinery. The attack disrupted fuel production and hit Russia's war economy. These strikes show Ukraine can reach hundreds of miles beyond its borders. A Ukrainian drone successfully struck an oil pumping station in the Tambov region. The damage caused a complete suspension of the Druzhba pipeline. The Druzhba pipeline is a major artery that transports Russian oil to Europe. By hitting critical economic targets, Ukraine aims to inflict financial pain on Moscow. The goal is to make the cost of the war too high for Russia and pressure the Kremlin. Ukraine's drone operations also focus on disrupting Russia's military supply chain. In a bold operation, Ukrainian forces hit a ship at the Caspian port of Olya. The vessel was reportedly carrying drone parts from Iran to Russia. The war is not confined to Ukrainian soil. In a significant development from last year, Ukrainian forces crossed the border and launched an offensive into Russia's Kursk region in August 2024. This bold move was designed to bring the war home to Russia and relieve pressure on other fronts. At its peak, Ukraine claimed to control nearly 1,400 square kilometers of Russian territory. This was a major psychological victory for Kiev and a significant embarrassment for Moscow. It forced Russia to divert troops and resources to defend its own land, something the Kremlin had not anticipated. However, the situation in Kursk has changed dramatically over the past year. Russia launched a series of powerful counterattacks to reclaim its lost territory. By March 2025, the pressure had become immense. Most of the Ukrainian forces that had advanced deep into the region were forced to retreat. Despite the pullback, the fighting in Kursk has not ended. Currently, Ukrainian forces control a much smaller area, estimated to be around 800 square kilometers. They have taken around 20 to 25 square kilometers of new ground in several directions. Berdyan, Novosotnitsky, Leonidovo, Pushkarnoye. These localized gains demonstrate that Ukraine remains capable of challenging Russian forces on their own soil. Behind the strategic maps and military analysis lies a devastating human tragedy. The civilian population continues to bear the brunt of this brutal war. In just the past month, Russian attacks have killed over 300 civilians according to the United Nations monitoring mission. This grim statistic only hints at the widespread suffering. Each number represents a life cut short, a family shattered, a community plunged into grief. The attacks are often indiscriminate, hitting residential areas, hitting hospitals, hitting schools far from any military objective. Recent incidents highlight the horrific reality for ordinary Ukrainians. As the war grinds into another year, the attitudes of the people are shifting in Russia and Ukraine. There is a growing weariness with the conflict and an increasing desire for a peaceful resolution. Recent survey data reveals a significant portion of both populations now supports the idea of peace negotiations. In Russia, 63% of the population is in favor of starting peace talks. This suggests that while the Kremlin maintains a strong grip on the narrative, a majority of ordinary Russians are feeling the costs of the conflict and want it to end. In Ukraine, the sentiment is more complex. Updated figures indicate that 69% of Ukrainians now support a negotiated peace. This is a notable increase from earlier in the war. Furthermore, 56% of Ukrainians say they are willing to accept a compromise to bring the war to a close. This reflects the immense toll the conflict has taken on the nation, the daily loss of life. And destruction has led many to believe that a negotiated settlement may be the only viable path forward. The willingness to compromise, however, does not mean surrendering. For Ukrainians, any acceptable peace deal must guarantee their country's sovereignty and long-term security. As of August 2025, the war in Ukraine exists in a state of unstable and deadly equilibrium. On the diplomatic front, the recent Trump-Putin summit in Alaska failed to produce a breakthrough. It merely confirmed the vast chasm between the two sides. Russia's demand for Ukrainian withdrawal from eastern regions in exchange for a ceasefire was a non-starter for Kiev. This diplomatic deadlock means that, for the foreseeable future, the conflict will continue to be decided on the battlefield where the fighting remains intense, and the human cost continues to mount with each passing day. Militarily, Russia is making slow but steady gains in the east, threatening crucial Ukrainian supply lines around Kramatorsk. This grinding advance is part of a long-term strategy of attrition. In response, Ukraine has escalated its own attacks using drones to strike deep within Russia to impose costs on the aggressor. Ultimately, the path forward is shrouded in uncertainty.